Hello and welcome back to the Frogs of War podcast. I'm Anthony North. That's Russ Hodges. We're back to talk all things TCU sports, coming off a dominant Big 12 tournament for TCU Baseball as the Horned Frogs take home their eighth Big 12 tournament or regular season trophy as members of the Big 12. Just an excellent weekend out there in Arlington. But first, Russ, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. The vibes were immaculate on Sunday. We had a retirement party, family party at my folks' house, and we had the game on ESPN2. We were watching it, and a dominant win from TCU, capped off by a nice bonfire to end the evening. Spent the day with family and friends. So great weekend all around, personally and fan-wise for the Frogs. Got a little bit of vacation time coming up here, so happy to be able to hop on the pod tonight and talk about this conference tournament dub because this was just a complete domination from TCU in this tournament. So really excited to talk about it and just see what's coming up ahead for TCU.
Yeah, a thorough domination, and we'll get right into it. And last week we recorded after the first two games of the conference tournament had completed. So TCU was sitting 2-0 in that winners bracket, looking ahead at a potentially clear road ahead to the title game, and that clear path really came to be as TCU got to take on Kansas State for a second time in the tournament and for a fifth time in like a week. So familiar foes there with the Wildcats in that semifinal game as Kansas State had eliminated both Texas and Kansas on their way to their matchup against TCU, and uh, TCU was able to take the day 6-3 in that semifinal win. But Russ, how did we get here? What is it that I think TCU just owns the Wildcats and really probably are the cause that they are not in this NCAA tournament. I know Kansas State fans were pretty vocal on Twitter about feeling like they were snubbed, but they certainly had plenty of opportunities through the season to win games that they should have, and enough chances where they probably win one more of these games against TCU, and it puts them in a much better position, but just couldn't take that purple contest this time. Russ, what did we get on that Saturday semifinal matchup?
It was a game that played very similarly to game one of the regular season series between these two teams in Manhattan, where it was a very close game. Both of these teams were going back and forth, and TCU had to kind of scratch and claw for runs in this game. You had a lot of RBI groundouts, sac flies, just doing whatever TCU could do to get runs across. The Frogs only had 3 hits in this game, and Kansas State on the other side had 10, but they also had 10 left on base. So TCU pitchers did a really good job in this one of getting out of some jams. Ben Abelt had a monster relief appearance in this game. Went just over 3 innings, had 7 strikeouts, did not allow a run, and I don't think either of these teams had a lead greater than 1 run going into the eighth inning. TCU was up 4-3. Carson Bowen makes a really nice play behind the plate. He throws a runner out at second for the final out of the inning. And on the other side, you have TCU coming back in the bottom of the eighth. Braden Taylor gets on, tries to steal second, and Kansas State's catcher throws it away. So as a result, he's able to move to third. And with Cole Fontenelle at the plate, Wildcats didn't want to take any chances pitching to him, so they put him on intentionally. This was a couple pitches into the at bat. So now you have runners at the corners. Trey Richardson's coming up, who is about as consistent gets at the plate. Kirk Sarloo's TJ Bruce made a absolutely gutsy call here, and they called for a bunt, and Trey Richardson lays down a excellent bunt down the third base line. The pitcher's able to make the play cleanly, and Richardson's out at first by like a quarter of a step. They wound up reviewing the play to make sure, and he was out. But not only did Braden Taylor score, but Kansas State tries to throw from first to third to get Fontenelle out when he's trying to advance, and that ball gets thrown away. And as a result, Fontenelle is able to score, and a a sacrifice bunt turns into a two-run play as a result of two Kansas State errors in the inning. TCU is able to go up 6-3, and then Benabelt comes back out for the ninth inning. At this point, I was a little concerned about maybe not going to Garrett Wright in that spot because Abelt had already thrown two and a third, and you had the top of the order coming up for Kansas State, and leadoff man gets on with a single, advances to second on a wild pitch, and at that point, I'm starting to get a little bit of sweat on the brow in that, Sarloos isn't making a change. He's sticking with the freshman. I know he's been really good recently, but this is a situation where it might just be too important to leave him out there when you have a closer that hasn't pitched, all tournament. But to give credit where credit is due, Benabelt came back the very next hitter with a huge strikeout for the first one of the inning, and then back-to-back ground outs, I believe both to the third base side, ultimately ended the game. So TCU winning 6-3 and winning four of its last five games against Kansas State. And going back to your original point about the Wildcat faithful maybe being a little frustrated that they didn't make the tournament, they must have felt strong enough about it as a program because they came out and the coach made a statement, a formal statement about how the selection committee got it wrong. And, I myself haven't taken a deep enough look at those numbers to formulate a real opinion on that. But hey, you take one or two of those games against TCU, you had a couple close games in that regular season series you weren't able to hold on to. And maybe if Elijah Nunez doesn't rob that game-tying home run at the wall, maybe that's it. Maybe it's a different story. It's a woulda, coulda, shoulda situation for Kansas State. But TCU dominating the Wildcats 16-3 on Wednesday, and then coming back 6-3 in the Saturday game. Really encouraged by the pitching. And the defense, especially, was kind of the theme that stuck out for me in this game, with Kansas State making two errors in the eighth inning that really lost the game. And I know we've talked about the defense for TCU this season being a big sore spot, especially early on when you had guys really struggling both in the infield and in the outfield. But again, to give credit where credit's due, I think TCU has been playing significantly better defense over the last several weeks. I think some of that has had to do with some lineup changes that Sarloos and his staff have made, and moving some different guys around and getting other guys in the game. And I think also guys are just playing better as well. So um, ultimately a great job for TCU to be able to hold off a good Kansas State team in a tight game and be able to move into the finals.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the regional matchup later, but I think those gifts, those free runs, those free runners are TCU's not going to have that in the regional. There's a lot of really strong fielding teams there, so I think TCU might find the Frogs will have to manufacture runs in other ways going forward. But I just to touch on the Kansas State, just because it's a kind of a fun thing to talk about, the statement that their coach came out and said about RPI and all of that. I think the message is relatively fair. Of RPI is known to be a terribly flawed metric to measure these teams and compare against one another. I mean, it doesn't take into account, margin of victory. It doesn't take into account, a win against a bad team that happens to play in an even worse conference but accumulates a whole bunch of wins is worth more than beating a team that plays in a good conference but is having like an average so-so season. So I think the spirit of his message is fair. However, his team this season lost games to awful baseball teams. I mean, they lost a series to Baylor. Maybe they got swept by Baylor. I mean, they who missed out on the Big 12 tournament. They lost games to teams like Omaha and which that's where the College World Series is, but that university's team doesn't play the best of baseball. Teams like St. Thomas, I don't know. They had a they had a bad enough resume that the RPI being what it was enough to keep them out. And I think it's tough because they did win the season series against Oklahoma, a team that did make the tournament. And there's talk of, oh, it's bias, it's big brand, this and that, but Oklahoma went to the national final, College World Series final last season, and they had an okay season. And yes, they didn't perform great against Kansas State, but sometimes that the head-to-head things, that game maybe didn't matter as much when it came to the rest of the resume going forward. So, you know, Kansas State can go back to not caring about baseball like they claim on Twitter. What a mess. Anyway, we can move on to the championship game, which TCU winning that game meant that they had that direct route to the finals, where they only had to play 4 games total, to including the championship, having dropped no games throughout and never having to fall into the losers bracket or um, be at risk of elimination until the championship game. So um, TCU's opponent in the championship game was not so lucky, as TCU did end up getting matched up with the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who took down Texas Tech twice on Saturday to emerge from their other side of the bracket. Oklahoma State came in as the 2 seed, and but dropped their game early and was able to climb out of that hole and fight back against Texas Tech. And Oklahoma State certainly has the bats to never feel like they are out of a game. However, after having to play so many games, 5 games in a row, um, is a tough gauntlet on that pitching staff, on the arms, and it certainly showed in the championship game, as TCU was able to just continue to accumulate hits and accumulate runs and force Oklahoma State to go to deeper and deeper into the bullpen and further away from the bullpen into position players throwing pitches, um, to Braden Taylor, that were since deposited deep into the Globe Life Park outfield bleachers. But TCU ends up taking the win 12-5 in relatively straightforward fashion, to come away with the Big 12 tournament championship. Um, Russ, what are the details here? What did how did you see this play out?
Both teams coming in really were in a situation where you weren't really sure who was going to be throwing, because even though TCU played fewer games, remember Luis Rodriguez was announced that he wasn't going to pitch because of a shoulder injury. Um, Kendall Rogers tweeted out that he was going to be hopefully ready for the NCAA tournament, but he wasn't going to pitch this week. So you had Cam Brown start on Wednesday. You followed that up with Cole Klecker and Sam Stottenborough, and so you didn't have many great choices to start. You were probably going to have to roll with a freshman or make it just a bullpen day. And for what it's worth, Cohen Feezer was fresh. Garrett Wright was fresh. Hunter Hodges, I don't think he pitched in the tournament at all. Luke Savage, I wasn't sure if he was going to be fresh or not, because I believe he threw 61 pitches in the game on Thursday. And then to follow it up with 2 days rest, maybe could be a little dicey as to how much he'll be able to throw there. But ultimately, it was Chase Hoover who got the start for TCU, and this was his first start in several weeks. He was a midweek starter in a couple of contests for TCU, and I thought he showed some good stuff in this game. I think Hoover's biggest issue right now is just command. Only gave up 2 hits, I think, in this game. He started and threw 2 innings, only gave up 1 or 2 hits, but he had 3 walks. Struck out 4 guys. He got some huge strikeouts to get out of jams early. Had a really good changeup that he flashed in this game to get a few outs there, but just struggled with some walks and got into a situation in the third inning with the bases loaded where Kirk Saarloos said enough's enough. Luke Savage came in and was able to limit the damage there to only 2 runs, both of which were charged to Hoover. On the other side, though, it was really non-sequential that those runs were surrendered because TCU had an 8-0 lead going into the bottom of the third inning because TCU came out and was in attack mode from the very start. You had Luke Boyers hitting a mammoth 3-run shot, 415 feet into the right field bleachers. That made it a 4-0 game. TCU loads the bases again in the top of the third for Trey Richardson, who steps up and hits a deep 3-run or 2-run double into right center field, nearly a 3-run double. Cole Fontenelle tried to score from first and was out by maybe a step, but it was a bases clearing double regardless that made it 6-0. Curtis Byrne, Austin Davis, they followed up with some run scoring knocks as well, and TCU had an 8-run lead after 2.5 innings, and I hate to say the game was over at that point, but given where Oklahoma State's pitching staff was at, you kind of felt that this one was likely over. Even after TCU gives up 2 runs in the bottom half, TCU just continued to sort of nickel and dime the Cowboys through the remainder of this game. Austin Davis had a really nice performance. He was 3 for 5, had 3 RBIs, was very active for TCU at the bottom of the lineup. Luke Savage, kind of surprised he wasn't named all tournament relief pitcher because he was excellent in this game. He threw 4 innings, again on 2 days rest, where he threw 61 pitches on Thursday, had 2 strikeouts, only gave up 2 hits over those 4 innings, and then Garrett Wright came out for the ninth inning and struck out the side to cap off the win in his only appearance of the tournament. So, as you said, this was a pretty straightforward win for TCU, not much to sweat about. And the theme, I think, for just this entire tournament was how dominant the offense was from top to bottom. And I think we've talked on the podcast about earlier portions of the season where you had guys like Cole Fontenelle and Trey Richardson and Anthony Silva who were swinging a hot bat, but you had a lot of guys that were struggling and still trying to find their way. But it feels like right now, I mean, you had well over 10 hits in this game against Oklahoma State. I think it was 16 or 17 hits was the final total. You had 19 hits in the game against Kansas. You had 16 or 17 in the game against Kansas State. Everybody is getting involved from top to bottom. Right now, it doesn't appear that there's an easy out in this TCU lineup. And so heading into the regional, I think that's what this team has going for it. Even though the pitching has been much better, and I think credit is due there to guys like Sam Stoutenborough and Luis Rodriguez and Ben Abelt and Luke Savage. But this offense, when these guys are hitting as well as they are right now, 1 through 9, TCU, I think, can beat any team in college baseball. And now we're going into a regional where you have Arkansas as the number 1 seed in the regional, number 3 overall seed for the tournament. And this is a team that TCU beat 18-6. Granted, that was way back in late February at
Game
Globe
number
Life
2.
Field. And TCU, to its credit, has been very good in neutral site games, whether they be at Globe Life or Minute Maid Park down in Houston. But I think you have to feel really confident about the way this team is swinging the bat. It doesn't seem to matter who's up to bat, how many runners are on base, whether it's a freshman or a junior or a senior. Everybody seems to be coming through right now and playing their best baseball at the best time of the year with the postseason coming up. So it was really exciting to watch, and I believe there were over 14,000 people who attended the championship game. So really encouraging to see that. The Big 12, I believe they changed venues this year for the tournament, and I know there were
A
some
couple years
comments
ago,
and
yeah.
and there were some comments on Twitter about how there's nobody in the seats and everything looks kind of dead, but there was a really good turnout for the championship game, and Oklahoma State deserves a lot of credit for, like you said, fighting out of that early hole and being able to make a run out of the losers end of the bracket to make the finals. But TCU was clear cut the best team in this tournament from top to bottom, and well deserving championship for the boys.
Yeah, it was also raining here on Sunday. So if the venue had been an outside venue, you may have had problems like they had in Hoover in the SEC tournament, or like you could have had back when the tournament was in Oklahoma City at their minor league park there. So yeah, it's a record crowd for the championship game, and yes, Globe Life is a little bit cavernous and it's a little bit lifeless when it's not filled to the brim, and it certainly would never be filled to the brim for a Big 12 championship or for during this tournament. But um, they filled in pretty nicely in the lower bowl there for the championship game, and makes for a good atmosphere and a good place to ensure that the games get played on schedule. You don't start eating into this week headed into the regionals, where people have to start really thinking about do they save their arms and not worry so much about the championship game and worry more about moving forward in the big tournament. So I mean, it's nice for me. It's here in Fort Worth, up here in North Texas. It's nice and close, so I appreciate that it's in Globe Life, but um, understand why some of the Oklahoma State people or the people in the Kansas schools maybe don't want to drive or fly down here. But um, yeah, I think to sum up the conference tournament, TCU dominated the day, outscored opponents 48-15. I think the total
Mm-hmm.
was just a what has to be the most dominant conference tournament performance, at least in the Big 12 conference. And TCU leads the way on, the all conference team. Braden Taylor very much deserved as that tournament MVP. The towering home runs, breaking the home run record earlier in the week, and really sealing the deal here in the finale to give TCU the trophy. While let's see, Benabelt, very well deserved. Carson Bowen, Curtis Byrne, and Elijah Nunez were all on the all tournament team, and we were joking earlier before we recorded that you could have just put the entire TCU roster as the all tournament team. I mean, TCU was so much better than everyone else that came to Arlington to this tournament that yeah, I suppose you have to let some other people onto that team, but really TCU top to bottom had no gaps, no weak links in that chain in any way in the batting lineup or in the rotation or in the bullpen. So if this is the Horned Frogs team that ends up in Fayetteville, the Razorbacks may be in trouble. They may be in for an upset there. Um, are we good to move on to the tournament, or do you have anything more on the conference tournament?
Yeah, I would say the last thing I'll add about the all tournament honors, just TCU's effort in the conference tournament is, again, the defense was significantly improved from what we saw during early midway portions of the season, where it was just kind of a nightmarish effort on a game to game basis. And Braden Taylor winning all tournament MVP. I mean, he hit 500, 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, had a 6 RBI game, but he also had some really nice plays in the field at third base. And I feel like that at times can be uh, forgotten about because he's playing such good baseball on the offensive end. But Braden Taylor had a great weekend at third base. Carson Bowen, again, had a really solid week at the catcher position. and Elijah Nunez also made some great running catches in the outfield out there in center. So um, we've talked a lot about the offense, but I think as a Frog fan, you have to also be really pleased with how the defense has shaped up as we get ready now for the postseason.
Yeah, one other comment I wanted to speak on the conference tournament is the inbound transfers from the intra-conference inbound transfers, Trey Richardson and Austin Davis, who in last season's conference tournament each went 0 and 2 to be eliminated immediately in the conference tournament with Baylor and West Virginia, respectively, and each had really good games in the conference tournament last year, and you could clearly see that they were outplaying the rest of the rosters that they were on. Certainly, West Virginia bounced back this year and had a really impressive season to be co-champions in the regular season. But for the two of them to join up here with this TCU team, I think it's just exciting for them to see them come from those depths of not to say that Baylor and West Virginia, that's not the depths of like college baseball, but they were in the same spot last year and both saw their teams eliminated right away. And this season come back with the Horned Frogs and are lifting the trophies and are huge contributors to the Horned Frogs season and to them lifting that trophy. So congrats to them as well, who, they weren't named on that all tournament team, but I think they played at that extremely high level as well. All right, so let's get into this NCAA tournament regional. As the regional was announced on Monday, and TCU did climb itself all the way from being on the wrong side of the bubble maybe a few weeks ago to the number 2 seed in the Fayetteville Regional, where the Arkansas Razorbacks are the number 3 overall national seed. And TCU gets paired up with the Arizona Wildcats, who fell in the Pac 12 tournament championship and were one of those teams on the bubble that Kansas State probably pretends that they were better than and would have liked to have seen them. That was really one of the last teams in the tournament, Arizona. I think very, very easily could have seen an argument for the Wildcats being left out, but that's not to say that this is a bad team. Reviewing their stats on the season, their wins on the season, there's a lot to like about Arizona. One is they're one of the top slugging teams in the country. Absolutely mashing the ball, extra base hits all over the place. Um, Multiple players with double digit home runs. So look out for their offense to start putting up crooked numbers and make this game one for TCU a really difficult day. And on the other side, um, I think they're the kind that they don't allow walks. While they don't really strike out a ton of guys, they don't allow walks, don't allow errors, don't allow a lot of stolen bases. So a lot of the things that TCU has been able to take advantage of throughout the season, Arizona may be uniquely well fit to stop the Horned Frogs. So really would expect a tough contest there in the nightcap in Fayetteville against the Arizona Wildcats. The other team in the regional is the Santa Clara Broncos, who won the West Coast Conference tournament as I think they were the 3 seed in that tournament. So they were not the runaway regular season champions, but they did sweep through and take that conference championship to earn their way into this. Um, I guess, Russ, what are your thoughts on TCU's placement in this regional and how it sets up for the Frogs going forward this week?
Going in, I was thinking that TCU would be a 3 seed, especially after those first couple of wins in the Big 12 conference tournament, and I wasn't sure if the Frogs would be elevated all the way up to a 2 seed, but I think some of the teams that ultimately stole bids for the tournament for example, Tulane, who I think finished 19-40 and found a way to win that conference tournament and get in. I think there were a few teams like that
Amazing.
that were able to uh, teams that were able to steal bids that had no chance of getting in as at-large teams. Maybe that helped TCU ultimately climb up to a two seed. I remember reading the D1 baseball final projections and Kendall Rogers. They had TCU heading out to the Stanford regional as I believe a three seed in that
Hmm.
one, and then ultimately it was Texas A&M that went out there instead of TCU. But for this regional, I think there's a sense of comfort that comes from TCU has already played and beaten Arkansas handily. Obviously, that was a neutral site game as opposed to having to play in Fayetteville, which is not going to be easy at all. But I think for this Arizona matchup, this is a team that I guess similarly to the Frogs, Arizona had a very tough stretch of the season, early midway part of the season, where the Wildcats were really struggling and were able to take advantage of that late season momentum, as you mentioned, making it to the Pac-12 championship game, and that probably saved their season and allowed them to get in over a team like Kansas State. So the power numbers that you mentioned, they're a little concerning to me, particularly because if Luis Rodriguez is not ready to go, I'm assuming that it would be Cole Klecker that comes out and starts in this first game. And Cole Klecker has had several outings where he's gone deep into games, 6, 7 innings into games, but in the outings where he's gotten roughed up a little bit, it's been the home runs that have gotten
Hmm.
him. It hasn't been like he's been giving up, 8, 9, 10 runs in an outing. It's the long ball has uh, bit him on the rear end in a couple of his outings over the last month or so. So that's
Yeah,
something
that
that
Oklahoma State. Yeah, back in that Oklahoma State game, I think in particular is the one where it was
I
like
believe there were
he
four
was pitching so
four home
well.
runs. Yeah, I
Yeah,
believe there were four home
yeah, he was
runs.
pitching really well and striking guys out, and then boom, smashed. So yeah, yeah, I agree with you there. That's a scary one.
Yeah, so I think we have to go in and hope that Rodriguez is ready to go. Cam Brown might have to be pitching if he's not healthy, and Cam Brown, we've talked about him this year. It's been to say the least, a mixed bag of results for him. His last two outings are a really good indicator of that. He had his most previous outing, I think he walked 6 guys, 5 or 6 guys, but was able to work around some things, gave up only one hit. And then the outing before that, where he came out, I believe, in relief, threw 3 innings and struck out five without giving up a walk. So um, it's going to be all hands on deck pitching wise for this series. I think you have to be pleased with how the bullpen is shaping up between Luke Savage and Garrett Wright and Ben Abelt and Cohen Feezer. Even though he didn't have his best outing against Oklahoma State, he's been really solid for TCU out of the bullpen. So hopefully Rodriguez is healthy, ready to go, and hopefully Cole Klecker and Sam Stottenborough can do what they're capable of. And if this team continues to hit the way it does, or the way it has been over the last, you know, three weeks or so of the season, I think TCU shouldn't have an issue moving past Arizona in the first round and setting up a potential big time matchup against Arkansas to see who goes into the championship.
Yeah, Arkansas is an extremely scary squad there in Fayetteville. I mean, they only dropped 4 games all season at home, something like 30-4, which is an absurd record, an absurd home record when you consider the competition that they're playing. I mean, they had season sweeps over Auburn and Texas A&M and M and Tennessee. I think took 2 out of 3 in several series against the SEC has all these teams hosting regionals and obviously some of the best teams in the country, and Arkansas when teams had to travel up there, it was bad news for the visitors. So I think it's going to be. I'm not sure there's really any reason to look back at that game from February and think that it relates anything to what these teams are today. Obviously, um, we're talking about there were a bunch of freshman pitchers in there for TCU as well. It's been a long season, and these teams are certainly much different. But in particular, the venue is so much different. I expect that atmosphere to uh, maybe be more hostile, more difficult than going to College Station last season. I think that um, that game last year in that regional had so much emotional weight to it, with Jim Schlossnagle being the coach headed down there to Texas A&M, that doesn't sit on everyone's shoulders in Fayetteville this season. But um, just seeing what that team, this team's trying to get back to Omaha again for the second consecutive year, and they ran to the semifinals there, and we're one of those squads where they do the Jello shot challenge there in Omaha, where their fan base was strong participants in the Jello shot challenge. So I think we know that they are some of the best fans and loudest and most intense opposing ballparks to go visit. So I think TCU's definitely got its hands full. And I'll put this question to you about the way the bracket shook out for TCU. Um, would TCU have been better off as a 3 seed somewhere else than being the 2 seed stuck here in a ballpark where the home team never loses?
I had that debate with a buddy of mine from TCU a few days ago in our Discord chat. We were talking about this, and I part of me feels like, yeah, I think TCU, if TCU were a higher end 3 seed versus a lower end 2 seed, which I think going into a regional with the number 3 overall seed for the tournament basically means that you're probably on the lower end of that 2 seed spectrum. When you look at I guess it would be 17 through 32 of that 64 team field. If you're a higher 3 seed though, then you're probably going into a regional with a lower end, like a 14 or 15, 16 overall seed in the tournament, and potentially getting a better draw there against a potential 1 seed. But I think the other side of that is you're also setting up a draw against a potentially dangerous 2 seed, which um, looking at the regional assignments, I didn't pay close enough attention to who that potential 2 seed could have been if TCU was a 3. But um, I think, could TCU have ended up in a better spot as a 2 seed? Yeah, I think so. If they had gone out to Stanford, for example, and been a 2 seed there instead of Texas A&M, then potentially you have a better draw. I want to say Stanford was a 6 or 7 overall seed, and I know they were top 8, but I'm not sure if they held up to the 7 seed that they were projected to be. But um, it's gonna be difficult in Fayetteville, and I think it would be difficult however it shook out. If you were a 2 seed or a 3 seed, um, nothing changes the fact that you still have to show up and play your best baseball. And I think with TCU's current momentum, the way that the Frogs are hitting the ball, the way the Frogs are pitching, the fact that outside of Rodriguez, you don't really have any major injury concerns, you have to feel very confident about the way the team's playing. The whole goal is to be playing your best ball at the very end of the season, not at the start of the season. And TCU had its lulls, midway through the year, and were able to make some moves in the lineup and get some different guys in the rotation and get some pitchers healthy. And I as a fan, I feel really confident. I think this is going to be a really fun regional tournament. I want to see Arkansas, and I really hope that it's TCU taking down Arkansas when it's all said and done. Because to be able to do that against a team, like you said, that's hardly lost at home this year would be a big time feather in the cap. And not trying to look too far ahead, but hypothetically speaking, if the Frogs are able to win this regional, maybe you get a chance to host a super regional if things shake out a certain way on the other side. So I'm excited for this weekend. I believe the first game it's TCU in Arizona on Friday, I believe. So Hopefully the games will be on ESPN2 or ESPNU or wherever, and we can watch them. And gonna be on vacation this weekend, but that's not gonna stop me from keeping track and seeing how the Frogs are gonna be shaking out this weekend.
Yeah, I myself will also be on vacation. I'll be in Las Vegas, Nevada, so I might have to throw a couple of dollar bills down on some of these games. Maybe I end up in the sports book a little bit and see they have these games on. That'd be nice to see. But um, I guess to the question about the regional that I posed. I mean, I think that as a thought experiment, just thinking, would TCU have rather had been North Carolina in the Terre Haute, Indiana State, just on the other side of the bracket from TCU and Arkansas, to where yeah, you're the 3 seed, you get to play a 2 seed in Iowa that you can probably feel somewhat like you're at least evenly matched, and then you get a 1 seed who is not a traditional power and not from a power conference, and you might feel a little bit better about coming out of your regional. But I don't think you feel any better about your chances at getting to Omaha. If your goal is to win the regional, then yeah, maybe being a 3 seed in a slightly lower um, tier regional is good. But if your goal is to get to Omaha, I think you're going to have to beat somebody really really good at some point. So yeah, if you're North Carolina and you come out of Terre Haute and you have to then go to Fayetteville for a super regional or come to Fort Worth for a super regional, that's also just as scary a prospect, I would think. So for TCU, they get to the opportunity to slay the dragon right off the bat here in the regional. And if you take down Arkansas in Fayetteville, you could beat anybody in the country, and you can continue this run similar to what Oklahoma did last year in a run all the way to the championship game. So I like you, I'm strangely confident about how this shook out for TCU. I don't think there's any reason to think that TCU should be the favorite or should be anywhere close to the favorite to emerge from this regional, frankly. But I do think the Frogs are playing at a very high level and have every opportunity to go there and make it happen. And um, should be, yeah, like you said, it should just make for some very very high level baseball. Really excited to watch it and everything that's happening. I think there's some fantastic regionals out there that lot will certainly produce the drama and produce those magic moments. And hopefully it's TCU standing there ready to at least, whether it's traveling up to Terre Haute to go see the Indiana State
Yeah.
Sycamores, I think that's
Hmm.
right. Or if one of those squads will be traveling down to Fort Worth. We'll see it play out this weekend. I think most of the games are scheduled to be on ESPN Plus. Although I do think TCU's first game is scheduled on like ESPNU or ESPN2. But they'll rotate the games around throughout all the different ESPN channels as different things are happening. So probably your best bet is to start on ESPN Plus if you're focused on just watching the TCU game. I'm sure they will have that, like the red zone, basically, that
Hmm.
like they have for the NFL. I'm sure that will be back again on whether it's the ESPN app or ESPN Plus or somewhere where they will bounce around to every regional and show you all the moments as they happen. So a lot of exciting baseball to take in this weekend, uh, and looking forward to watching it as we're able to while we're each traveling. All right, we'll move off of baseball. That's the big thing happening in TCU world right now, as all of the spring sports kind of close and baseball is the last thing standing. But there's still plenty of other news around TCU sports. The big thing that dropped today, the big news: TCU basketball secures the commitment of former 4-star, 5-star, McDonald's All American, um, center transfer from Kansas, Ernest Uday Jr., 6'11", 250 pounds. He did not get a chance to play all that much for the Jayhawks this season. He did appear in 30 games, averaging about eight minutes a game, scoring just a few points a game, but is certainly the high level athlete that in the transfer portal everybody wanted. He had just visited Duke. He was appeared to be one of Duke's kind of primary targets there. So TCU to go and win that recruiting battle to earn the commitment of Ernest Uday Jr. is a huge prospect for TCU basketball going forward into the 2023-24 season.
And not to put another needle in the side of Kansas State fans, but I believe Kansas State was also in the mix for Uday. I'm not sure if I don't think he visited K-State, but I believe they were in the mix for him as well. So another thing for K-State fans to complain about on Twitter. But this is something that kind of came out of left field because we felt that TCU could maybe add a center in the portal at some point. I think at one point on the podcast we may have talked about Damian Collins, the Kentucky transfer, but Uday, like you mentioned, he visited Duke, and all signs seem to be pointing in that direction. The fit there seemed a little strange to me because Filipowski is coming back, so you know he's going to be a big part of what they want to do next season. He plays the center position. I know he's probably more versatile on the offensive end, but I don't know if you could run him and Uday out there together. Their combination of size, I just don't know if that would work. So really, he would be coming off the bench at Duke versus competing for a starting spot at TCU, where Eddie Lampkin, of course, has left for Colorado. We know that Suleimani Doumbia is not on the team anymore now at Sam Houston State. So even with Isam Mostafa coming over from Coastal Carolina, who's a talented player in his own right, a 12-point, 10 rebound guy, Uday is going to bring a little bit more size at 6'11", 250. Mostafa, I think, is 6'9". Cork is 6'9". So you have some more size coming in. You have an extremely athletic player who shot almost 76% from the field last year. And what does that tell you? He's not going to really shoot much outside of 3 feet. He's going to be someone that I think you count on to be a rim roller, to finish around the basket, set good screens, rebound the ball, block shots, kind of the modern things that modern centers are asked to do in today's NBA. Not more of the I don't think he's going to be more of the featured low post guy. I think he's going to be someone that can use his athleticism, run the floor. We know TCU likes to be explosive on the fast break and get out in transition. I think he's a big guy that'll be able to move up and down the floor. And this is another feather in a loaded cap for Jamie Dixon and his staff, where TCU had the number 10 ranked transfer class in the entire country prior to this news. And so I have to believe TCU is going to be in the top five for sure, maybe top three once Uday is added. I want to see what it looks like on 247 Sports once they get it updated. But I mean, my goodness, the talent that is going to be coming in between Jameer Nelson and Avery Anderson and Trey Tennyson, Isam Mustafa, and now Ernest Uday. Yeah, you've lost a lot of players, but most of the players that you've lost were bench players or guys who were really non-factors on the team this season. And so, um, even with Mike Miles declaring for the draft, we're still waiting on news from Damian Baugh and Emmanuel Miller. The clock is ticking on them. They have an hour and 56 minutes to make their decisions official as to whether or not they're going to withdraw from the draft. But regardless if those two guys come back or not, I think all of these additions, these are all players who I think are going to play right away, whether they be starters or guys who come off the bench. And that's huge when you consider that you're going to have some guys coming back like Jacoby Coles and Chuck O'Bannon and Micah Peavy who have experience and have been contributors very recently. So super excited about this. This roster is looking really nice right now. And, when the season was over, we were trying to gauge, what our expectations would be for next season because there were just, so many unknowns and the off season is very long and there are so many things that can happen in terms of the portal and everything. But um, TCU beating Duke out for a basketball prospect is not something that I had on my bingo card. So I think if you're a TCU basketball fan, you have to be really, really excited about this. And this is a guy now who has a chance to come in and compete for a starting spot and potentially have a very big impact for TCU next season.
Yeah, expectations are going to be sky high again going into next season. I didn't think it was possible for them to get higher than they were going into this past season, but even losing Miles and potentially losing Ball and Miller, it still feels like this is a team that should be hanging around the top 25 all season, should be a no doubt tournament team and a team that should be, with pushing for a second weekend, pushing for that Sweet 16. So I, there's no question I'm ready to get let down again, I think is what I'm saying. I think expectations are going to be very high, and it will also be interesting to see how those true freshmen are implemented into the lineup and whether they just straight redshirt or if they will be contributors with all this new addition to the roster. If Jace Posey and Isaiah Manning will be able to come in, highly touted guys, and provide any further depth. I mean, this bench now. I mean, we're talking about basically 10 to 12 players on a roster that could feasibly see meaningful minutes throughout the season. Is a really deep team. So excited to see what comes up into next basketball season, and excited to continue to refresh Twitter and hope that someone drops
Just
the
just
John
got done
Rothstein
refreshing
bomb.
Twitter as you were speaking there. We still have nothing, but
No,
um,
no
may,
news is no news.
maybe we're gonna have we might have a 11:59. Maybe TCU Athletics is trying to keep us in suspense or
I don't
something.
know.
Maybe
Maybe
we'll get
maybe
a
there's some NIL negotiations that are going here into the final hours. I don't know. But moving on to the quick final thing here to add on, the TCU football had some schedule news drop earlier this afternoon, as these are going to continue to come out through I guess up until the season kicks off. But we now know five of TCU's scheduled games with game times officially booked and broadcast partners selected. So we already knew about the season opener kickoff, the big noon kickoff with Colorado on Fox on September 2nd at 11 a.m. local time. But we now know the following week against FCS Nicholls State will be on ESPN Plus at 7 p.m. Then the week after that, in the Big 12 opener on the road at Houston, will be primetime Fox 7 p.m. So just like the Houston athletic director was really pushing for this, I think Brett Yormark was really pushing for this, and Fox was able to make it happen to get this game as the night game. First of all, September in Houston, you probably don't want to be playing a noon game or a 2:30 game. I think we're all better off for that to be an evening game. But also, there's been discussion of plans in place to have like a full day weekend event there, where the Big 12 would host concerts and make it a whole festival there in Houston for their first ever game in the Big 12 conference. So a big exciting game there on the road. A team that TCU should be able to handle, but that's you go on the road. I think that'll be an exciting game. And then also two November games have been locked in officially, with their kind of being on weekdays. So on Thursday, November 2nd, the game in Lubbock will be on FS1 at 6 p.m. Central Time. So that's a little bit early on a weekday. People might still be driving home from work. I don't know. That's probably not the best time. And we know there's weird things happen in Lubbock on those Thursday night games. TCU's played in that situation there before. I think that game with the Fox on the field was a Thursday night game back there in Lubbock. So should be an interesting one. And then the regular season finale on Black Friday at Oklahoma will be a Fox 11 a.m. kickoff. So if both squads or either squad is in a strong position there, expect the big noon apparatus to all show up there for that Black Friday event there in Norman. Potentially the final Big 12 game ever for the Sooners if they are not a participant in the Big 12 championship. Just excited for football season. We're getting there. I mean, it's only a few months away now, and already the preview magazines are starting to come out, and I'm starting to get that itch. It's just barely the school's let out, and it's already like, is it fall yet? It needs to be fall. Let's get here to this football
And we're
season.
gonna have some content later this summer coming out for y'all on frogsofwar.com. We're gonna be rolling out our usual football previews. We like to do our position group preview articles, the quarterbacks, receivers, safeties, linebackers, all that will be coming out later this summer as we get ready for football season, as well as some of the other fall sports as well that'll be coming around in late August. Indoor volleyball, soccer. We expect
Soccer,
those teams
excited
will
for
be
soccer
expect
too.
that both of those teams will be really strong again. Volleyball coming back in its second season under Jason Williams. That program really took a step forward this past year, and then soccer has been consistently playing at a top tier level in the Big 12 under Coach Bell for the last several years. So really excited for football and also the fall sports coming around. And be sure you follow us on frogsaward.com and follow us on social media. We'll have some really good fall sports preview content coming your way as the summer continues to move forward.
Yeah, we appreciate everyone following, listening to us here, and all the exciting things that we have on the website. Drop us a line, drop us a rate, review, follow, all of that, and we'll catch you next time. With that, go
Go
Frogs.
Frogs!